Excited to welcome New Mexico head coach Mike Bradbury to the basketball podcast. Mike Bradbury enters his ninth season as head coach for the University of New Mexico women's basketball team. In his previous 8 seasons at the helm, Bradbury has guided the Lobos to 162-89 and 89-51 in conference, and became just the second coach in UNM history to win 100 games. Overall, as head coach, he has won over 340 games. 5 times in his tenure, the Lobos eclipsed the 20-win mark, with the Lobos tying the program record for most wins in a single season with 26 in 2021-22. Further, the 25 wins in 2017-18 were tied for the second most wins in program history. Prior to New Mexico, from 2007 to 2010, Bradbury led Moorhead State to a 50-44 record over the course of 3 seasons, including a 22-11 mark and a bid to the WBI in his final season as head coach. At Wright State from 2010 to 2016, Bradbury had 5 seasons with 20 more wins and led the school to its first NCAA tournament appearance in 2014. Coach Bradbury, welcome to the Basketball Podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. And coaches like yourself, I've got to ask, because this has been on my mind so much. Like, we can talk about all your success, which you've had, but a part of success that I don't think we value enough, especially in coaching, is longevity. And you've been able to experience that in your career. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think continued success, and I think with us and with my staff over even different schools, is just staying consistent and sticking to the plan, trying to continue to improve. Been at New Mexico 8 years now, and in college athletics, that seems like forever.
It seems like forever, and it's a wonderful thing to achieve that and to be able to be that consistent as well. And I mentioned in the introduction just the number of 21 seasons and all the different things like that. And I don't know if people understand how hard it is in college basketball to win 20 games.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think it goes a couple different ways. Is one, you have to have the right players with the right attitude and all that. Secondly, you have to build your schedule where you can continually get better throughout the year, be challenged, but also build confidence along the way. We've been able to do that. And then with our crowd at New Mexico and the support that we get, we have a lot of people behind us and a lot of support that allow us to do some special things.
It's an incredible venue, I know, and to be able to coach in that venue must be pretty cool.
It's great. Like I said, 8 years ago, the fans are the reason I took the job. We have a good history here. We have a good program, and it's been good for a long time. And the support has been there for a number of years, and our attendance records and things like that. And that was important to me to come to a place like that.
Love it. And getting into some of the basketball and some of the reasons for your success. I know I talked to some people, I read some articles, and one of the things that shone through for me, which I love, is the efficiency of the words that you use. And it appears that, at least in a practice sense and probably in a communication sense in general, you are not a time waster. You get right to the point and communicate what needs to be communicated. And can you talk a little bit about that philosophy?
Yeah, we want to get it to a point where we're not thinking. So we keep everything as simple as we can and try and use for them as much as we can one syllable words and things like that. So it's easy for them to remember and understand. So when we go through things, we'll talk about footwork and things like that and the language we use and foot down, left foot pivot, things like that keeps us from having to think all the time. And we'll say things like, so what? We don't want people worrying about making mistakes. Look, we're all going to make them. And the biggest thing for us is we have to be able to continue to play and not worry about, oh, is somebody mad? We tell them right up front, no coach, no player, no teammate is going to be mad at you for making a mistake. We're going to get mad when you don't finish the play and continue to play. No, nobody's here. So so what? Play.
I love that. I love that so what philosophy. And the part that connects for me there is players aren't trying to miss shots. They're not trying to drop passes. They're not trying to actively sabotage what's happening. Mistakes happen. But then you referenced there are certain things that we can get on them about, or teammates can get on them about. And talk to us a little bit more about that category of things.
Yeah, I think for us is if you some non-negotiables. So if we have to play at a certain level of effort, and that's expected and set by the older players. We get that across pretty early. Then there's our footwork stuff. And that is non-negotiable. If you're a right-handed player, and for this discussion, everybody's right-handed, you're going to have left foot pivot. Every time you catch the ball, left foot pivot. And with that is we do that so you have the same shot. You don't travel. Like we don't get any traveling calls on our team. In women's basketball, that eliminates a lot of turnovers. Those are non-negotiables. We catch every pass with two hands. You can't smack a ball down. You pick up loose balls, things like that. Those are non-negotiables. And we get that out pretty quick. And we have recruits and fans and boosters that show up at practice and all this stuff all the time here. And they're fascinated by if a player, if there's just a ball bouncing, somebody shooting before practice, they go grab it and we call it consume it with two hands. So nobody just goes over and bounces a bouncing ball. The habit is they've already picked it up. So those are just a few of the like non-negotiables. And those are the things that could get us to raise our voice, which doesn't happen very often.
I love that phrasing, by the way, consume a loose ball, because a common problem when you're teaching players is that they try and obviously possession is more important than position. So getting possession of the ball is the number one thing. So consuming it before you dribble it is the most important part of that process. So I love that language. Can you take us some insights in terms of how you develop that shooting non-negotiable of footwork? Where does that come from for you?
For me, I was an assistant at Xavier 20 something years ago, and Thad Matta, Sean Miller, those were the men's coaches back then. They had some really good players, bunch of pros on that team, went to the Elite Eight. And my boss was Kevin McGuff at that time, who's now at Ohio State. And we started it back then. And they had permanent pivot foot was the term back then. And they had these great players that were going to be lottery picks, and they're doing it. And they would chart it and how much higher their percentages were shooting the ball, doing it this way, and how many less turnovers they had. So we started it back then and haven't wavered on it since.
So a new player comes into your program, especially we're dealing with a little bit of the transfer culture, obviously. So they're coming into your program. Can you take us through the process of initially teaching someone who doesn't go permanent pivot foot to be able to get them to do it, to be able to change? Because habit changing is part of this process.
Right. Once we get them to do it, and we teach it in a certain way where it's nice and slow, and we'll first start with just simple passes to them, left, right shot, over and over, then give them a different angle to do it. Then you can prove it by the numbers. And their 3-point shot will go up 10%. If they're already a pretty good shooter, it may only be 3 percentage points, but it'll be really noticeable with their numbers. And then once we start playing, whether it's 2-on-2, 3-on-3, how many times they travel or turn the ball over. And we show them, and then we'll show them on tape. And then we'll show it in actual percentages. And, it takes about 2 weeks, and we've never had anybody that wasn't receptive.
Of course, because players want to do their best and they want to become better than they are. So if you show them the numbers, that helps the process, doesn't it? Can you give us another example of where you use numbers to be able to highlight kind of areas that players need to improve?
Yeah, shots, a lot of shooting things. So any shot that you get, that's a step-in shot. Like you're going to shoot step-in threes better than you're going to shoot threes that are going away from the basket. We're a motion team that drives the ball and moves the ball. So most of our threes are kick out, step in threes. Those are good shots. So shots that come from the paint to the 3-point line, we will shoot at 38 to 42 from three. Shots that just continually go around the perimeter, like you would see a lot of times against the zone, those will be at 30 to 31%. So that's significant in a game. That's 4 to 6 points in a game, and that generally determines if you win or lose. So those are things like we want our 3-point shots coming from the paint out.
It really highlights the difference in the game. You and I have been in the game for a long time, and we certainly used to spend a lot more time on coming off of down screens, pin downs, and having to turn to shoot, and these different things that I can remember obsessively coaches doing so much of. And it just doesn't happen as much, is it? There aren't as many movement shooters anymore. And as you referred, it's because it just makes more sense to be able to pass from in to out and be able to step into shots.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we will get some kids that are obviously better than others or more capable at this than others, and they get a little more freedom. Just that's just the way it works. They're better the talent, but for the most part, that's what we do. And there are situations where you can't just dictate things, especially time and score late in the game. You got to run some stuff with 4 seconds left, and they may be coming off a screen going away from the basket. When you need a three, those are, you try and get that shot the best way you can.
Absolutely. And can you take us through one of your non-negotiables a little bit deeper on the defensive side?
Yeah, like loose balls. We're going to dive on every loose ball. Okay. If a ball is going out of bounds, we save it to a certain spot. Those are non-negotiable. We always know when a ball is going out of bounds exactly to where we're going to throw it. Another one is we call it don't get beat outside. We want to get that ball moved to the strength of our defense, the way the help is built.
So the loose ball one I love because, I mean, on inbound, baseline inbound in particular, we always had a safety area where our players knew if it was a 4 count, we were throwing it to this area. Nobody knew where we were throwing it necessarily.
Yeah.
We're just throwing it to that area because we know where we're going. And don't throw it to a player, throw it to an area. That's similar to what you're doing on loose balls, right? There's an area. Instead of trying to throw it to a teammate, you're throwing it to an area.
That's correct.
Okay.
Because I know when I was taught, it was go yelling, run toward the ball, the person saving it, yelling their name out. I don't know. They can't see you, and by the time they sound, and it never came to you. We throw it to a certain area, and we got a couple of people running to that spot.
I'm smiling because when you said call for the ball, that also triggers something in me all the time that I'm spending all this time trying to convince kids who have been told to call for the ball to not call for the ball, because to your point, it also alerts the defense. It just doesn't make sense to me to call for the ball. And that's where decision making becomes paramount. Or as you said, some type of scripted solution, which is we know where it's going, so you know where to throw it.
Yep, absolutely. That's our thinking is the same.
You mentioned a lot of drive and kick on offense, a lot of penetration. So can you talk about some of the different ways that you're trying to create those advantages to be able to, again, get in, to be able to potentially play at the rim or to be able to kick out?
Yeah, with our movement within the offense, we're trying to gain advantage. And the better the player we have, the quicker that can happen. But there's some years where the other team may be quicker and more athletic. So we got to create a lot of movement. And we install it very simply when it takes forever during the summer. But we're in that process right now. And with us, we've got to get everybody moving, and everybody basically is playing the same position. So once we get the ball moving, whether it's on the dribble or the pass, then each line you cross determines where the next person is. It was very hard. We changed to this a few years ago, and Mackenzie Novak and Keith Freeman have been great. And first they had to teach everything to me. And so we go through that process, and Keith knew me better, and because we've worked together for a long time. And I said, yeah, okay, first thing we got to do is we got to get this simplified and into one syllable words. Because if I can't do it, then it's not going to work. So that's how it all started. And now they've got me to have the same amount of conviction that they have.
I love it. Keith Freeman, a legend, and thanks for him for connecting us, obviously. And Mackenzie Novak, a rising star. She's going to be an incredible coach, and I'm so grateful that you're there mentoring her as well. Talk to us a little bit more about that line concept. I love your efficiency of language. So just take us a little deeper for those that understand what you're talking about.
So if we're going to drive the ball and say it's from the wing or whatever, our spacing's got to be right, and we'll get that part right pretty quick. But then if they drive it and it crosses this lane line, okay, that triggers the 5 player to move, that triggers the opposite wing player to move to a different zone on the floor with no call, no anything. Okay, then the next pass, depending on how that pass is thrown, were you stationary or were you moving? So if you're moving, then you're going to continue to move. If not, then that triggers something else. If you're driving, these are just options, driving it from the wing. If you continue to drive it from the wing, you get stuck and then you throw it up. Now you go to a different zone. It triggers the other wing players to go to their different zone. So that's what I mean. If you drive it from the top, once you cross the free throw or the 3-point line triggers one person, the free throw line will trigger another. And none of that has to be called. So that takes forever to teach and install. But once you get it in, now we can play. And it literally does not matter what the defense does.
And my understanding is you went through a bit of an evolution from 5 out to more 4 out, 1 in as well. Talk to us about that process, because I think coaches get stuck on that. But when you talk about what you just explained to us, it strikes me as it's very conceptual, and sometimes it's going to be this, sometimes it's going to be that, but it's very adaptable.
This offense is very adaptable. The transition, when I first got here, we had a dominant post player, and a little small version of dribble drive, but it was mainly high, low. We're going to hammer that thing in there. And we did. So that lasted for a couple years, 2 or 3 years. Then we didn't have dominant post players anymore. We were small and we could shoot it. And so that's when we went to the 5 out. And we played that way for 3-4 years. And then we get to 2 years ago. Now, with the personnel we had, we didn't shoot it very good. We were quick. We were athletic. So that's when we made that change to this. So we have changed offenses 3 times in these 8 years based on personnel. This is the most adaptable. I think we can play with or without a good 5 player this way. So I think hopefully this one will stick a little bit.
And it's one of the reasons for your longevity. You've been able to change. You're not married to one way. You're married to the best way. Talk to us too about the importance of this adaptability within kind of this modern basketball that you're experiencing now, which is not just the analytics, but different players in your program every year that have to be fit to what you're doing in some way.
Yeah, I think with us, obviously, we would like to shoot a layup or shoot a 3. Okay, that's great. But you do come across some players, and we've got one now that is really good from that spot nobody wants to shoot from. Okay, so if the numbers say we're still getting positive production taking that shot, then those players will shoot it if they're capable. So we're not just all or nothing. You can't do it, you can't do it. If you like to do it and you can do it really good, then you can keep doing it. We would like to be the new way of 3s and layups, but people are starting to defend that way as well. So you can take them away. I know we set up our defense simply to protect those 2 areas. We will give you every 13-foot jump shot you want to take.
What's interesting about what you just said is I spend so much time with coaches, especially when coaches have imperfect rosters, high school coaches in particular. Obviously, they know the analytics. They follow the NBA, WNBA, wherever they're hearing the analytics that are perfect. But I tell them, you can't play necessarily that way because you don't have a perfect roster. You don't have 5 players that can shoot it. You are lucky to have 1 or 2 that can really shoot it or even drive it and create advantages. So it doesn't always apply at all levels, and I'm glad you said that. But then also the other part that you said, teams are now loaded to do this. So how can you counter that? What are your covered solutions to them taking away the 3-point line on you, coach?
Yeah, that's where our offense, and we're trying to move them, and we're trying to gain that advantage. So our focus, we don't really even talk about get 3s. They're just going to happen. Our goal is to get an advantage and get that ball where we get a foot, 2 feet in that charge circle. And that's where we're trying to get the ball. And if we can get it to there, everybody on our team can score, even if guarded, can score in that area. So that's how we do it, with movement, and then also hopefully with some talent that can get it to that point.
Talent always helps, doesn't it? And coach, talk to us a little bit about some of the lateral dribble stuff. You referenced dribble drive. I know some of the Doug Novak type of offensive stuff that all blends with that. But the lateral dribble is one of the ways to move the defense, as in addition to obviously the cutting and the different type of looping and all the different ways to do that, where you cross these lines and the different ways that you cross these lines.
Yeah, and it comes off of, we're trying to get, so if we're going downhill from the top lane line area, we're going to sit in that corner or on that wing, wherever it is that for that particular moment. And when they cross that line, we figure we can get a head start on that defender. So then when we receive the ball, we have momentum that they don't have, and we're using it against them. That's how we're trying to get to our spots, is just with leverage. And you're saying lateral dribble and stuff like that. I hear what you're saying. I don't use that language,
Tell us the
but
language you use.
like we're going to say we're going whatever we've called this pass, which would be a kick for us, then they get it. And now we're trying to attack at the best angle possible toward the rim so we can get to that circle. And then if we don't have enough leverage and they ride us out, once we cross that lane line, we know we're not going to be able to score. That triggers the next person to move. And that's where the pass is going. Now, hopefully they can gain that leverage that we were just trying to gain on the other side.
Beautifully explained. The drive is trying to create an advantage for the receiver. And
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's beautiful stuff. And I've watched your offense on Synergy. I can see it. I can see what you're doing. And it's awesome to watch. I encourage coaches to check it out as well, because it really is a blend of different styles. And that's what I think, again, whatever we call modern basketball. But modern basketball is blending all these different things. And through your lifelong learning in basketball, so much of it applies to what you're doing now, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I was fortunate. I've got to work for a lot of different coaches. And then when I got my first head coaching job, you think you got it all figured out. You've been an assistant for 16 years and you get out there and that first game and you like, whoa, I don't remember what we were supposed to do here. And it was a wake up call. So now the last 16, 17 years I've been a head coach, I've tried to get staff that weren't exactly like me. We had the same beliefs and thoughts and stuff, but do it a different way and able to make adjustments. And that's where I've learned the most, to your question, was all the people that I've hired and what they bring to it from experience. And I have a ton of assistants that have been head coaches or are head coaches now. And Keith being one of them, but Katrina Merriweather at Cincinnati, Valerie King at Texas A&M Commerce, and Erica Hughes at Loyola Marymount. All those people, at one time, all of them were on my staff at the same time. So I've been fortunate with that too.
It was a question I was going to ask you later, but we might as well go into it now, because your coaching tree is pretty impressive, really. Again, and the success, the consistency obviously leads to that, but obviously there's a big development piece from you where you give them autonomy to be able to build and grow. And Katrina's done this podcast before. I've visited Erica's practices, just really people that are doing a really good job in basketball.
Absolutely. And they're really good people. And I think that's what we try to do is I try to hire really good people, high character people that want to work and be as good as they can. We do the same thing with the players that we recruit, is to try to get high character, hardworking basketball players. And I think that's why those people have been so successful. There was not a better person and recruiter in the country as Katrina Merriweather. She is off the charts, and that's what she was known for. And now she's still all of that. Trust me, their talent on their team always improves. But now she's showing everybody like she can really coach. And she started that off in year one at Wright State and just won like crazy every single year that she was there. Yeah, she's tremendous. And then Val's knowledge of basketball and things was an easy transition for her as well.
It's awesome. It's awesome. It must be great to be able to see that and watch that. And we mentioned non-negotiables from a basketball perspective. Can you talk to us a little bit about the cultural piece, the leadership piece within your program, in terms of the things you value that have led to this consistency of success for all your different colleges you've been at?
I think the biggest thing is for us is we want to work hard. And that's the first thing we do, is how hard we work and how disciplined we're going to be. We have very few like set rules and things like that. We recruit to what we call team chemistry. We figure if we have high character kids, you don't have to do a lot of the stuff, the quote team building and things like that. That takes care of itself. And then the consistency part is keep the main thing. If it doesn't affect winning and losing, it's not worth worrying about. And I learned that real quick at Morehead State. Is we rode to every game on a bus where the door didn't even close all the way. It's like you have a 50-mile-an-hour draft coming right at you all winter long. Okay, we could complain, and we did complain. Okay, the first trip would have no bearing that we stayed in a Super 8 motel and took that bus, and that's the way it was going to be all year, and we eat pregame meal at McDonald's. None of that affected winning and losing the game. So why worry about it and why talk about it? Let's practice, let's prepare, let's go win. And that's our attitude about everything. Only worry about what affects winning and losing. Again, I know that's simple,
No,
but we run
coach,
everything through simplicity around here.
the glamour of Division I jobs, right? Everyone thinks it's magical, but sometimes the door doesn't close. I get it completely. But I actually love the way you phrase that, because I think sometimes one of the problems with culture conversations and all that stuff is that we try and account for everything. And you can't account for everything, and nor do you want to, because you're coaching human beings and you want them to be human beings. As you said, if it doesn't affect the court, what are we doing?
Correct. And if you treat, basically, we try to teach a little bit more than basketball and about how to be successful in life to our kids too. And you've got to be at your best as much as you can. And we try to stay every day. And whether you're sick or you have a headache or you're not feeling good or you've got other things on your mind, all of this, nobody cares. Our opponents do not care if we have a headache or if we're a little bit sore or our plane was late or we didn't get enough rest because of travel problem. Okay, nobody cares. Is all they're going to care about is what happens during that 2 hours. So again, get over it. It doesn't matter. You have to be as good as you can be all of the time.
And sometimes when you bring attention to these things, it makes it worse, doesn't it? So just let's go. Awesome. I love that. Coach, can you talk to us about staff organization within practice? I'm imagining this has evolved over your time as a coach, also relative to what you're doing right now in terms of how you organize your staff on the court during practice with responsibilities.
Okay. I'm very fortunate now because I've got a really good staff and have had since I was at New Mexico, since I got this job. So in practice, my staff leads all the drills and things like that. And I think that Mackenzie does a good job in all the breakdown drills and those kind of things. Keith does a really good job in the bigger picture things, offensively and defensively. Nike does a really good job in the breakdown stuff defensively. But with our staff, we don't just have them do what they're great at all the time or coach a certain player only all the time. Everybody coaches, everybody watches film with everybody because they all want to be head coaches one day and they're all going to be. But they're not going to be successful unless they can do all of it. So they have their strengths, but they're also going to coach to their weaknesses too, so we can get better and they can get better.
I love that. And then within practice itself, let's say you're doing something 5-on-5, some type of full court. Is it anyone's able to stop, anyone's able to coach? Because one of the common problems that I see a lot when I see practices, and one of the most efficient ways, and I know you're an efficiency guy, so I love asking you this, is coaches tend to sometimes stack on top of each other when something stops. Meaning you say something, then someone else wants to say something, someone else wants to say something, then you want to say something again. So talk to us about the efficiency part of practice and communicating to players when you want to intervene.
Yeah, so first thing is we don't stop it a lot. We let them play through a lot of mistakes and we let them go because we figure that's how they learn. But once play stops, usually whoever stopped it, the play will have something to say and they can say it. If it's just the end of and it stopped on its own because we were going 3 possessions or something and play just stops, anybody can talk, but nobody will talk on top of anybody. So if somebody's talking or I notice somebody else is talking over here, I just blow the whistle and then one person will talk. So we don't really have that problem. And we don't do a lot of talking at practice. We play through stuff and work through it. And then we'll spend 2-3 minutes after practice or before the next practice talking to that player about whatever it was. And we'll be watching it on film.
Good. I'm glad you highlighted that. Thank you to be able to explain, because again, it's just a very common problem of too much talking happens when you stack or you talk on top of each other. Awesome. Now take us through that process. So a player comes in the next day and you want to highlight a few things from practice. What does that look like? How do we communicate to that player some of those things?
Yeah, that'll be all be done by the staff. And then when we watch film as a team, I'll do a lot of the talking. But when they come in, we've already discussed it as a staff, and they show 2, 3, 4 clips to that player so they can see it. And then it's just talked about right there, whatever the situation is.
What happens post practice in terms of you and your staff, in terms of, okay, we get together, we discuss, okay, this got better, this needs to get better. What are we doing in terms of reviewing practice that leads to the next practice?
Yeah, we watch the film, and that Keith is really good at that, and breaks it down, and he'll say, I think this overall stuff. And then I'm not near as good as at the detailed stuff as they are. I'm even bigger picture than that. And it's more, okay, how can we get it to this situation more? And then they do a really good job of figuring out how to get us to that spot. I know what we want. Now, how are we going to get there?
So you all get together, you watch the film right after practice?
No, we'll
Next
watch
day?
it different times,
Okay.
like our own time, whenever, because we all got, especially this time of year, we've got a ton of recruiting and stuff going on too. So everybody's got their own things they have to get done. So you watch it when you can, and then we'll talk about it the next morning.
Okay. So you debrief the next morning on what you can do better. Yes. Perfect. It's great. Similar process after games for you and your staff?
Yeah, watch it when you can. And a lot of people are different. I don't like to watch it right after the game. It's still too raw to me.
Either did I, Coach.
I've got to do it the next day, when just so I don't, because I've got too many thoughts in my head, and it's going to distort reality for me. So I got to wait.
How do you debrief with your players after the game then? Because you haven't watched the film yet. Obviously, you haven't gone through the deep dive of the analytics. So what are you doing now post game, and how has that changed throughout your career?
That has not changed hardly at all. I go in there less than a minute, and I go in there and I'm like, okay, make sure you get some rest, get to all your rehab. This is win or lose. It's the same thing after every game. We're never too high or too low. And go in there, hey, that's a tough one. Get your rehab done. We're not going to talk about the game. We'll watch it, and then we'll go over it tomorrow. Have a good night. That's it. And most of my assistants have played for me, so they're used to that kind of stuff. When I've had the 3 assistants I've had over the years that didn't play for me, the first post game they heard, we're now walking from the locker room back to the office, and they're like, what was that? And I'm like, what do you mean? That was it. And they couldn't believe it. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's the way we do it.
No, it's awesome to hear, because we've had some other coaches on here that have highlighted something similar, that we can't really give them anything valuable right after the game anyways, except for kind of our biases from the game. Right. And those aren't always true, as we know. So I love that aspect of it. And I think particularly for youth coaching, sometimes we have to communicate a little bit more about the schedule or what's coming next, because usually multiple games and stuff. But beyond that, again, win or lose, let's get better, move on, and let's talk about it. What are some things in your coaching career, from as a head coach in particular, that have changed since your first years at Wright State and then Moorhead and then here?
Yeah. Biggest thing is, back then we would run some 4-out stuff and a lot of set plays, ton of set plays, and everything was geared toward that. It wasn't fast. It wasn't like I really wanted it to be. And then that was at Moorhead State. And then once I got to Wright State, we got more into the dribble drive, the way, like the old time dribble drive. And we ran that and recruited to that. And it was really good to us. And we ran that the last probably four years at Wright State. And that's when we were at our very best. And then we got out here, we didn't have that. We were big. So we played that way, like we've already discussed. So my coaching is what's changed, is evolved with, the philosophy has evolved with the changing of college basketball now. And I don't really care how we play now. I used to try to fit it to where this is the way I want to do it. Now we evaluate our team and we look at them and we say, okay, this is the best way to play with our personnel. So I'm much more flexible with that. We don't do, where I've changed a lot is, when I think this is with most young coaches, you yell at the referees every time the whistle blows, all that stuff. Okay, I never do that anymore. And then you want to yell and scream at practice when people make mistakes. Well, I did all of that early in my career. Now we don't do any of that. We say, so what? Let's move on. Those kind of things. And a lot of that has changed because that's the way today's kids are. Back when I played, you played, all of that. That was the only way. You're going to get on that line, you're going to run, somebody's going to scream at you and all that. And that's the way you were motivated. And I think that's the way people were motivated when I first started coaching too. And now it's just not that way.
And it's amazing. Even without all that yelling, kids still play hard, don't they?
They're playing way harder and way better without all of that. And you know what? I'm way less stressed.
Not to mention, you probably enjoy yourself more, because I know that was one of my problems. Is sometimes, like, when I was that way, I definitely left practice going, I don't like doing that. What am I doing? And it just becomes your nature, because that's the way we were shaped. That's the way we were taught to do it. And it's a conscious process to change. Can you take us a little bit through that process of changing?
Yeah, with me, I just thought it was necessary. And not just me, it was just like our whole staff. The approach has to be different. And we were winning and all that, but like it was more like a job and for the players and things. And it's okay, look, we can have a little fun at this and we can laugh a little bit when we can joke a little bit, things like that. And it's just made it better. So it was just a decision, and then being able to get over things quicker. And it wasn't hard for me to do.
It's beautiful. And yeah, I love the part that you connected there. That's okay to have fun. Like, it's sometimes I actually literally have to tell players, especially when I'm doing a lot of player development stuff in groups, say, look, you're allowed to smile in my practices. Like, you're allowed to actually have fun. Because I think sometimes they've been a part of programs or places where it's 100% intensity all the time. And if you're not, you're wrong, and blah, blah, blah. And the game is a game of focus and unfocused. And if we don't teach them when to be not focused, they don't learn how to be focused, type of thing. And I'm imagining that's what your practice looks like to a certain extent. There's an ebb and flow in a practice too, isn't there? It's not always this 100% intensity.
Correct. We have our teaching time and how we're explaining things, putting in stuff, more parts to the offense. And then we play, and we play a lot like of transition stuff, and where we have a numbers advantage that's created. And now there's intensity to that, but man, you're supposed to be creative and have a little fun. You got an advantage. Now we should be able to score every time, but you can have a little creativity, and we don't go all crazy if somebody tries to make a play. When I don't want to say just like a behind the back pass or something like that, but hey, if they want to try to make a creative play, now's the time. Let's see if we can do it or not before we go out there in a 2-point ball game.
Reconnecting that back to the non-negotiables, they're able to do that in part two because they know what's a non-negotiable. Yeah. They know the 1 or 2 things that really matter. You got to do it this way for these things, but the rest, be the best version of yourself creatively.
That's correct. Absolutely. We don't want to take anything away. And when I say that we try to get them to play without thinking, is we are long, we're athletic, we can shoot it. And if you're thinking or worried or whatever, it just paralyzes you. And now you're not athletic anymore. We've lost the one advantage that we've got, and that's what we don't want to do.
Get them to not think. Simple, one-word language for as much things as possible. Can you give us a few examples of those one words that maybe have changed? Like, we used to say all this, and now we say this.
Yeah, we name our passes. So like we got kick, up, and then duck, high, duck, like that's a post feed. And then drop would be like a backdoor cut. All of this stuff, like everything's just one word. And we can just say something like, they came for a kick, they should have dropped, or whatever. That's so easy for us to say while they're running up and down the floor. Jason, drop, just to get it in their head to maybe make that cut again.
I love it. I love it. And we've talked about adaptability. We've talked about your offense. We've talked about those different things. So take us in with the efficiency of language, the adaptability. How do you then shape a game plan based on, again, opponent scout and now your game plan? It must be, again, a very efficient part of this. It must not be this long process for you guys.
Yeah. So our offense is very, I don't want to say complicated. It's not complicated, but it's very lengthy. And so with us, we don't run the whole offense in every game. So that's where we make our adjustment in the scouting. Okay, we're probably going to have a lot of this action against this team because this is how they play. They're going to force us to drive it this way. They're going to play the post this way. Okay, these are the actions that'll work against that. So that's offensively how we would attack it. Defensively is where that's more me, and that's where we're going to change some stuff. Is we're going to guard you a certain way. And you have two options if the other team has a dominant post player. Okay, which in our league, we had a couple of teams like that. UNLV obviously being the best one. And they had a great post player. You got to make a decision. Are you going to go double her, or are you going to play her one-on-one? We've done it both ways because Desi's been the best player for 3 straight years. And I wish her well in her future, and especially now since she's gone. And so first we played her both ways, but there was a reason behind it. Okay. The better her supporting cast got, and which was tremendous the last 2 years, she would kill you throwing it out of the double team. And she was willing to do it. So now you had 5 or 6 people in double figures. Okay. Or you let her get 30 and 17 one-on-one and see if you can keep everybody else to 6 or less. So it just depends on how you want to play. And for us, it was determined by the supporting cast. You know what the star is going to do. What's that supporting cast capable of? And that's just that example when they have a post player. Same way if they've got guards that can shoot or drive it or whatever. We're going to plan according to what we're willing to give up to stop something else and see how it works.
From the outside looking in, coaching looks easy, right? Stop them. But then there's all those decisions that really, again, people that have coached know you can do everything right and still have the wrong outcome. And that's part of the challenge of coaching. Maybe take us through a little bit deeper. When do you make an adjustment? So let's say something that you went in with, let's say the game plan was we're going to double, and now it's not working. We're doing it great, we're doing it well, but it's not working. So do we adjust, or do we just say, let's keep going?
Yeah, we're going to adjust at some point. It depends on how bad it's going to how long you
Take
try
us
to
through your decision process then with that.
Okay, so you come out, okay, now you're going to make this, we're going to double her every time. Okay, that's great. And they've now hit their first 5 threes. And that was something you were willing to live with. Okay, now we may come out and say, okay, yeah, these next 2 possessions, we're going to play them one-on-one, see what that looks like. And then on the 3rd possession, we'll go back and double again and see if we can just get them out of rhythm. Something like that would be an adjustment we would make. Sometimes you're not capable of just front her and don't ever let her get it. Okay, that's good. She's good too. That's why you having all these problems. Sometimes it's not just that easy. Sometimes you got to mix it up and give them a different look or double from a different angle, things like that. But it depends on how bad it is. If they make the first 5 or 6, you may have to do it by the 2nd quarter and get out of it, or you're already out of the game. If they're 3 for 6, even though you thought they might be 1 for 6, okay, we're going to give it a little time. Maybe they're going to come back to what we thought by the end of 40 minutes. But definitely not going to make any adjustment if they just hit the first 2 or 3 shots when it's like panic time. Because sometimes that actually will help you if you have a bad shooter, because I know it does for us on our team. If you have your worst shooter make a 3 early, and now all of a sudden they just want to shoot them every time, they're going to shoot to the back of that baseball card at some point, right? So we don't do it too soon.
Although the part that I want to highlight there is just talking about a little bit of variability. Your offense is variable because you have some randomness to it because of the way that you're playing conceptually. And defenses, the best defenses, I feel, have become quite variable as well, where you can't just do the same thing the same time. And I love how you highlighted that for coaches, is the sense that, okay, we're going to go do this for 2 possessions and then come back to it. And then that almost tells us the answer there, doesn't it? It's if we come back to it and it's better again, then it's just that they got used to it. And now we got to create some variability.
Correct.
Love it. Coach, within that aspect of scouting report and game planning, can you talk to us maybe about how that's changed over time? And I guess maybe particularly highlight, we know that you don't talk to them much after the game. How do you talk to them before the game?
A little bit longer, but not as long as most people. About a 5 to 7 minute pregame. We go over for the very last time, assignments, the plan, the strengths, and what we're trying to do. And that's it. But is where we have done it all is we'll spend time in film right before we go to the floor to put the plan in. And that day at practice, that's when we're installing everything. So you get plan A and plan B. Okay. And 80% of the time is on plan A, 20% of the time is on plan B. And now we feel like we got everything we need to go in there and give ourselves the best chance to win the game. But we're going to work hard at it in practice. And we do spend time, a lot of time on it in practice. And that's why we don't talk about it a lot, like in the locker room. They know what they're doing. They know the calls. They know when to call them and when to go. And that's it. So now we're not thinking anymore.
And imagining with your language efficiency, you're calling things what you call them. You're not trying to pick up opponent calls as much as, or are you?
We're going to call our stuff the way we know it, like our coverages.
Yeah.
How we're going to cover the ball screen, how we're going to, all that. Those are all ours. Now, if we pick up what they're going to do over time, and we do a lot, especially in league play, you just know people a whole lot better. But yeah, you pick up the calls, then we're aware of those. We don't make our players aware of trying to pick up their calls. We'll pick them up. Then we use our language to our players. That way they don't have to worry about other stuff. We're going to tell them if they call something green and we call it blue, I'm going to look, hear green from them. I know in my head that means blue to us. And so that's how we would say it.
So if somebody asked me a question, how does Mike Bradbury do that? I would have answered it that way based on just getting to know you over the first 40 minutes of this. Because again, it's about not making them think as much. It's a beautiful thing. If you just refer back to that in almost all your coaching, you will become a more effective coach for your players, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And they appreciate it too. Like the players appreciate it too. And it goes back, just keep the main thing, be simple, let them go play.
I feel like we almost try and impress the players. Like we do so much of the work to try and impress them, but all they want to do is play better and win. And really that what can we give them to do that? And a lot of these scouts and a lot of these extensive stuff that we put together looks impressive from the outside, but on the inside, it doesn't always help your players. And you've realized that, haven't you?
I have. The more information you give them, you can overwhelm them and where you don't know anything. If we can know 2 or 3 things really good, we're way better off than trying to know 10 different things. And I'm going to say, okay, you got number 12. Okay, you got to take away the 3 and you got to make her bounce it. And then on the second bounce, we're going to come get it. Okay, that's it. Of course, she can do other things, but that's the one thing we can't let her do, or we're going to lose. If we make her do something else, and I know she's capable of it, we've got a plan to come help you. There's no help if you can't stand there and take away the 3.
Coach, man, I love this conversation, and it just boils down to simplicity and communication, and don't make them think too much. And I love that. Man, you've been doing it for so long, and a lot of older coaches that have been doing it for as long as you have been getting frustrated with the game and the direction of the game and all those different things. And you've adapted and you keep going. And clearly there's something that you still have this love and passion for the game. Can you talk about that for us?
Yeah. For me, it's the players. And we're recruiting the right players with the right attitudes and things like that. And it's been great for me to be able to make that adjustment and coach a different way and do it a different way. And so it's exciting. When we made the change a few years ago to this offense, that was exciting to me. And then we've done some different things defensively now because our personnel is different. We got bigger, we got longer. So now we still traditionally play our man-to-man, but we've incorporated some zone, some half-court trap, things like that I would have never done. And that's just refreshing. And being able to play that style makes you come in every day and it gives you something new to watch on film and new things to teach. And it's exciting.
I love it. I really enjoyed our conversation, Coach, and grateful for you to be able to share the game with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.